Check this out. Although no evidence has surfaced yet about how much the auction of 600 people enriched the Ball family, the amount Ann Ball paid for 1/3 of them is recorded in her bills and buried within the boxes and folders of the family papers at the South Carolina Historical Society. They showed she doled out $79,855 to purchase 215 people, a sum worth $2.8 million today. On March 13th and 14th, 1855, the firm of J.A. Beard and May placed on the auction block 178 enslaved men and women and children at the Banks Arcade in New Orleans, Louisiana. Arcade, that's interesting, huh? Where you play games and shit. And I just want us to get a good look at this, what you call it, sugar and cotton plantation, slaves, exclamation point. In the succession of W.M. Lambeth and for a partition. They put a lot of energy and effort into this document. So everything I just read, terms, everything that I read. So this came directly off of the flyer. This is the flyer. Before we get into the deep stuff, I want to just touch some of this real quick so that we can all be on the same page. I found an auction sleeve, and there's a lot of this stuff available. There's a lot of these things around, before the South was embarrassed by it, they were very proud of these things. Before they were embarrassed, they were very proud of these things. So I found an article, and I also found, I want to just talk about this catalog, slave auction catalog from Louisiana, 1855, which, in the grand scheme of things, wasn't that long ago. On March 13th and 14th, 1855, the firm of J.A. Beard and May placed on the auction block 178 enslaved men and women and children at the Banks Arcade in New Orleans, Louisiana. Arcade, that's interesting, huh? Where you play games and shit. Yeah. They were part of the estate of William M. Lambeth, who died in 1853 to settle an estate. Judge J.N. Lay had ordered the sale of 127 enslaved people from the Waverly Plantation and 51 from the Meredith Plantation, both in Aeolus Parish. The catalog from this auction includes business aspects of the slave trade. I'll remember this part. But also personalizes the enslaved people by providing details about specific individuals and family relationships. The document stipulates that slaves will be sold singly and when in families together. One such family includes Anthony Moore, about 30, fine engineer and field hand. Sarah Moore, 32, good field hand, tonsils occasionally inflamed. Wonder why that is. Infant, 2 months. Anthony, 3 years. Stephen, 5 years. Nance, 9 years. Sophie, 12 years likely. Terms. I thought this would be interesting because I wanted to get into the term stuff because we're about to start listening to a whole bunch of terms that get used, and it's interesting that they're still being used. But I digress. One third cash and the remainder at 12 months credit for approved city paper bearing vendor's lien and mortgage on the slaves. The eventual interest of 8%. In case of non-payment at maturity, all sales to be completed within 10 days from adjudication, or the slaves will be resold for account and risk of former purchaser after 10 days advertisement in one city paper without further notice or other putting in default. No slaves delivered until terms of sales are complied with, but will be at risk of the purchasers from adjudication. The slaves will be sold singly, and when in families together, they can be seen 3 days previous to sale on application at the office of auctioneers, number 8, Banks Arcade. acts of sale before T.O. Stark, Notary Republic, at the expense of the purchasers. And I just want us to get a good look at this what you call it, sugar and cotton plantation, slaves, exclamation point. In a succession of W.M. Lambeth and Foray partition. They put a lot of energy and effort into this document. So everything I just read, terms, everything that I read. So this came directly off of the flyer. This is the flyer. Cotton plantation. This is the flyer. Real quick shout out to Solo Dolo. What's up, bro? Other side of my brain. He's watching from the clouds. Salute to you, my friend. I truly, truly appreciate you. Salute. So I like to look at these things to just kind of bring back perspective. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Just so that because that wasn't that long ago. And, I'm thinking maybe I'm tripping, right? Maybe it's not as bad as I think it is. Maybe I'm just tripping. Maybe I'm just, maybe I'm tripping. So then I dig a little bit deeper and I find this other article that really kind of gets into it a little bit too. Now, and again, the only reason I'm doing this is so that, I want to just set the table so that I don't sound like a crazy person when we start talking about all this other stuff later on. So I'm over here on ProPublica. Let's see. Oops. Sorry. All right. And there's this article about one of the largest slave auctions in the country ever. And there's a bunch of things that just popped up in here that I thought were really, really interesting. And it comes right about here. Let's see. I think this is, yeah, okay. So a ProPublica reporter found the original ad, and I'm sorry, let's make it a little bit bigger so that everybody can see this with me. Which ran more than 2 weeks before the one Davila spotted. Published February 6, 1835, it revealed that the sale of 600 people were part of the estate auction for John Ball Jr., scion of a slave-owning planter regime. Ball had died the previous year, and now five of his plantations were listed for sale, along with the people enslaved on them. The Ball family may not be a household name outside of South Carolina, but it is widely known within the states thanks to a descendant named Edward Ball, who wrote a best-selling book in 1998 that barred the family's skeletons and with them chose of other slave owners. The slaves in the family drew considerable acclaim outside Charleston, including National Book Award. The Black readers North and South praised it, but Ball explained it was in white society that the book was controversial. Among some of the white Southerners, horrors of slavery had long gone minimized by a lost cause narrative of Northern aggression and benevolent slave owners. Based on the family's records, Edward Ball described his ancestors as wealthy rice landlords who operated a slave dynasty. He estimated that they enslaved about 4,000 people on their properties over 167 years, placing them among the oldest and longest plantation operators in the American South. 4,000 people they've enslaved over 167 years. Let's continue. John Ball was a Harvard educated. Ain't that something? Harvard comes up a lot when you talk about slavery. I don't know whether people know this or not. I'm sorry to all my people that went to Harvard, but Harvard does come up a lot when you start talking about slavery and American slavery. Whatever. John Ball Jr. was a Harvard-educated planter who lived in a 3-story brick house in downtown Charleston while operating at least 5 plantations he owned in the vicinity. By the time malaria killed him at 51, he enslaved nearly 600 people, including valuable drivers, carpenters, coopers, boatmen. The plantation spanned nearly 7,000 acres near Cooper's River, which led to Charleston's bustling wharves and Atlantic Ocean beyond. This guy was balling out. ProPublica reached out to Edward Ball, who lives in Connecticut, to see if he had come across the details about the sale during his research. He said that 25 years ago, he wrote Slaves in the Family and knew an enormous auction followed Ball Jr.'s death, yet I don't think I contemplated it enough in its specific horror. He saw the sale in the context of many large slave auctions the Balls orchestrated. Only a generation earlier, the estate of Ball Jr.'s father sold 367 people. You know what's interesting? What did they get? Shador, I think he went 144. Got it. Okay. It's kind of a summit in its cruelty, Ball said in the auction of 600 humans. Families were broken apart. Children were sold from their parents. Wives sold from their husbands. It breaks my heart to envision it. It gets worse. And this is some crazy stuff right here. After ProPublica discovered the original ad for 600-person sale, Sealer and the woman who supported Davila's research unearthed another puzzle piece. She found an ad to auction a large group of people enslaved by Keating Simmons, the late father of Ball Jr.'s wife, Anne. Simmons had died 3 months after Ball Jr. and said the ad announced the sale of 170 people from his estate. They would be auctioned in the same week in the same place as the 600. That means over the course of 4 days, Tuesday through Friday, Ann Ball's family put up for sale 770 human beings. Have any of you guys seen 770 people together at one time? Yeah, okay. In his book, Edward Ball describes how Ann Ball, and this is a woman, mind you, that can't own stuff, that can't vote, can't own property, can't vote, can't own property. Remember what we're saying, a woman, she can't vote, she can't own property, but she's just saying now she's facilitating a sale of over 700, almost 800 people. I digress. Let's continue. In this book, Edward Ball describes how Ann Ball approached plantation management like a soldier, giving lie to the view that only men had the stomach for the violence of the business. She once whipped an enslaved woman whose name was given only as Betty for not laundering towels to her liking, and then sent the woman to the workhouse, a city-owned jail where black people were imprisoned and tortured. Fascinating. A week before the first auction, ad appeared for Ball Jr.'s estate. A friend and business advisor dashed off a letter urging Ann Ball to sell all of her late husband's property and be freed from the burden. It is impossible that you could undertake the management of the whole estate for another year without great anxiety of mind. The man wrote in a letter preserved at South Carolina Historical Society. Ball did what she wanted. What does that really mean? You're on a freaking plantation full of black people by yourself. So, be careful. On February 17th, the day her husband's land properties went to auction, she bought back 2 plantations, Comegee and Midway, 3,517 acres in all to run herself. A week later, on the opening day of the sale, 600 people, she purchased 191 of them. Ann Ball. Mid-March 1835, Auction House ran a final ad regarding John Ball Jr.'s gang of Negroes. It advertised residue from the sale of the 600, a group of about 30 people yet unsold, and bought them as well. Given she bought, and I got to get down to the numbers. We're almost done with this. Bear with me. This is important. Bear with me. This is important. Given she bought most in family groups, her purchases of 215 people in total spared many traumatic separations, at least for the moment. As she picked who to purchase, she appears to have prioritized long-standing ties. That's interesting. She prioritized long-standing ties. Several were elderly based on low purchase price and their listed names: Old Rachel, Old Lucy, Old Charles.
Those properly indoctrinated.
I'm so glad you said that, Broken Blade, because you know what? That situation is going to come up again too. Many names included on her bills also mirror those recorded on an inventory of John Ball's plantations, including Cumming Tea, where he and Anne had sometimes lived. Among them, Humphrey, Hannah, Celia, Charles, Esther, Daniel, Dorcas, Di, London, Friday, Jewel, Jacob, Daphne, Cuffy, Carolina, Peggy, Violet, and more. Most of their names are today just that, names. But Edward Ball was able to find details about at least one family Anne Ball purchased. A woman named Tenna and her older brother Plenty lived on a plantation a few miles down the river from Cumming Tea that Ball Jr.'s uncle owned. Edward Ball's figured, and sorry, like I said, bear with me, we're almost done. This is important. Edward Ball figured they came from a family of blacksmiths, carpenters, seamstresses, and trained workers who lived apart from the field hands who toiled in stifling, muddy rice plots. Tenna lived with her husband, Adonis, and their two children, Scipio and August. Plenty, who was a carpenter, lived next door with his wife and three children, Nancy, Cato, and little Plenty. When the uncle died and he left Tenna, Plenty, and her children to Ball Jr., the two families packed up and moved to Cumming Tea, and then home to more than 100 enslaved people. So they moved from a plantation to another plantation. Let's see, life went on. Tenna gave birth to another child. Ben and Adonis tended animals, blah, 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 blah. Let's see, although the families were able to stay together, they nonetheless suffered under enslavement. At one point, an overseer wrote in his weekly report to Ball Jr. that he had Adonis and Tenna whipped because he suspected they had butchered a sheep to add to people's rations. Edward Ball wrote in his book. After the husband's death, Anne Ball purchase appears to have kept the two families together, at least many of them. The names Tenna, Adonis, Nancy, Benna, Scipio, Plenty are listed on her receipt from the auction's opening day. So, they were accounted for. Yet hundreds more who remained for the sale of the Ball auction likely ended up in a transnational traffic to Mississippi and Louisiana. Said Edward Ball, and now to work on a book about the domestic slave trade. But here's what I really want to get into: birth of generational wealth. Okay, although the sale of 600 people as part of the estate auction appears to be the largest in American history, the volume itself is hardly out of place in the vast scale of the nation's chattel slavery system. And I want to put numbers on this stuff, okay? I want to put numbers on this stuff so that we'll understand what the hell we're talking about. So bear with me, we're almost there. Ethan Kittle, a history professor at California State University, Fresno, noted that the firm auctioning much of Ball's estate, Jervey and Waring and White, alone advertised the sales of 30, 50, or 70 people virtually every day. That adds up to 600 pretty quickly, Kittle says. He and his wife, the historian Blaine Roberts, co-wrote Denmark Vesey's Garden. A book examines what he calls a former confederacies of a willing amnesia about slavery, particularly in Charleston, and urges a more of an honest accounting of it. Funny how that works. Slavery was a form of mass commerce, he said. It made select white families so wealthy and powerful that their surnames still form a sort of social aristocracy. Aristocracy, I got it. In places like Charleston. Check this out. Although no evidence has surfaced yet about how much the auction of 600 people enriched the Ball family, the amount Anne Ball paid for 1/3 of them is recorded in her bills and buried within the boxes and folders of the family papers at the South Carolina Historical Society. They showed she doled out $79,855 to purchase 215 people, a sum worth $2.8 million today.